Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM-LP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcast and podcast emanating out of occupied Tsalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices from struggles for liberation from all around the world. This week we spoke with Petr, a Russian anarchist member of the group Autonomous Action, who is living right now in Europe. For the hour we speak about the invasion of Ukraine, a bit about the resistance inside of Russia to the war drums and the Putin regime, the dangers of nuclear conflict, the impacts of increased sanctions and anarchist organizing across borders through Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus against war and against tyranny. You can learn more about what's going on by visiting avtonom.org, and you can find there an English tab, or you can use tools like Google Translate to read articles that are in Russia there and not yet translated. If you'd like to support anarchist organizing against Putin and the war in Russia, in the show notes you will find links to some cryptocurrency wallets affiliated with Avtonom and other anarchists there. Also, a reminder that you can also find links to anarchist solidarity and defense organizing and fundraising in the show notes as well. To hear our past interviews, including histories of anti-fascist organizing in Russia, queer organizing, state repression, ecological resistance, and other topics, you can find them linked in our show notes. The Final Straw is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
Bart, I agree with you in theory. In theory, communism works. In theory. In theory.
So I says to Mabel, I says, "Oh, hello, I'm Tom."
I'm Alicia.
And I'm Nate. And we're the hosts of Works in Theory podcast on the Channel Zero network. Have you ever been in an argument on Twitter and just wished you could drop a devastating David Graeber quote, but hadn't actually read any of his works? Or are you interested in the foundational works of anarchism and communism, but weren't willing to slog through 300 pages of 19th century text?
Works in Theory podcast has done the hard work for you. We read works like Peter Kropotkin's Mutual Aid or David Graeber's Fragments of an Anarchist Anthropology and make them accessible through casual conversations.
Our whole first season is up now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Search for Works in Theory podcast. You can subscribe. You can even go ahead and listen to Works in Theory podcast because
Communism works. In theory.
So would you please introduce yourself with whatever name, location, preferred gender pronouns, or affiliation that you can give us?
Yes, so my name is Petr, or Petr in English, and I'm located in Europe. Would prefer not to disclose the particular location, but it's Europe. And I associate myself with him. So yeah. Cool.
And are there any projects that you're involved with for the sake of this conversation?
Yeah, so I guess like the most important for this conversation is that I participate quite heavily in the Autonomous Action is doing. So this one of the largest, or maybe even the largest organizations and groups of anarchists and libertarian communists in the ex-USSR countries. So I've been involved into the Autonomous Action quite a lot before I moved to Europe, and I'm still involved when being here. So yeah, that's there are lots of projects going on, but mostly like spreading information and like organizing more or less the stream of like anarchist views and anarchist analysis of the current events for as wider audience in Russia and the neighboring countries as possible.
Cool. So like I'm familiar with avtonom.org as a website where I can find like occasional English translations, but like updates of stuff and ideas going on in the Russian language sphere. Would you share a little bit about the history of that group, Autonomous Action more widely, and like the shared values and beliefs, like you said, that most people identify as anarchist or libertarian communists, and sort of like where the members are and what sort of stuff the projects do?
Yeah, so the Autonomous Action was established quite a long time ago, 20 years ago, in fact, in 2002, 2003. And essentially, as I've said, It used to be an organization with quite solid libertarian communist and anarcho-communist platform, like based on essentially Kropotkin, Bakunin, Bookchin, but it was not very picky, meaning that we cooperated with all sorts of progressive left, but still our opposition towards the state and towards the statist left was quite pronounced always, all the time. And during like the first maybe 15 years of its existence, Autonomous Action was quite active on the streets. So we really like organized, I think, hundreds of various street actions. And we also were quite integrated with the Antifa movement in Russia. I think the Autonomous Action was a major sort of player in anti-fascist movement on the streets. But then, like in the recent years, since the state repression is constantly increasing, it becomes more and more difficult to actually like organize something on the streets openly by anarchists, which means that we more and more sort of try to become, as I've said, a stream of information, essentially. And that's why we nowadays call ourselves not an organization anymore, but a media project, right? So we're on a website, we're on all sorts of social networks, but those members of Autonomous Action who are still in Russia, and most of them are, in fact, they, of course, participate in all sorts of street protests and all sorts of grassroots initiative, from environmental to political stuff like the current anti-war protests. Yeah.
Cool. And you've mentioned that you're in Europe right now, but I wonder if you have a sense, at least among Russian anarchists and Russian-speaking anarchists that you're in contact with, what are the reactions to the war that the Russian government's been the escalation that the Russian government's been building, but in particular the invasion of Ukraine and sort of the justifications behind it. We've heard of a number of like marches around Russia with many arrests and beatings as well. Yeah.
Well, it probably will come as no surprise that all the anarchist organizations or movements or projects that I know about in Russia, of course, pronounced quite explicitly their position against this war and against Putin's regime, which started this war. And I guess for us as anarchists, it didn't come as much surprise as, for example, for liberals. I mean, we were not surprised that Putin will start another war. It's like, I mean, wars accompany capitalism always, and even more they accompany capitalism in this favor which we observe in Russia. This strange mix of neoliberalism, authoritarian regime, and patriarchal propaganda for the crowds. So, yeah, we were not much surprised, but of course we were a bit surprised by the scale of it. I mean, nobody, I guess, seriously believed that Putin would really decide to occupy, or, well, to at least try to occupy the whole country, the whole Ukraine. Our guess was that only the eastern and maybe some southern parts will be under attack. So yes, the scale was surprising, but not the war itself. And there were lots of protests around the country. And, well, the protests are still ongoing. People still go out in the streets every day. And anarchists, of course, participated quite a lot in these protests, but the protests are quite disorganized because it's really, as I've said, it's really difficult to really organize like a real demo, for example, in Russia, because it's just those who will call people to come to some particular place and time will be probably arrested long before it started. So it's really just spontaneous organization of people via social networks, etc. But still, yes, indeed, in the first days of the war, like some groups of anarchists in Moscow, for example, and in St. Petersburg as well, did manage to gather in crowds with banners and with anarchist slogans, etc. But most of the times, anarchists were just part of the crowd, right? Without any like banners or flags, because if you have a banner or if you have a flag, you will be just the first one to be arrested, of course. Yep. But yeah, of course, the attitude of all all the anarchists in Russia is anti-war and anti-Putin.
From what I hear in the Western media, the Russian government has criminalized media outlets or organizations that call this an invasion or a war. Do you have the impression of if the population in Russia knows what's going on with the battles, with the shelling of cities and the refugee crisis that's building? And do you get the impression that this will be like the new Chechnya to bring the country together into Putin's arms?
Yes, so that's true. Indeed, in the best spirit of George Orwell, the Russian government indeed criminalized, like to call this war a war. So officially it is a special military operation. And indeed, even for carrying, for example, a sheet of paper with the words "no war" in it, you can get a fee, like you will be penalized. And if you do it the second time, at least in theory, you can get a jail sentence, which is a significant step towards Putin's regime was being more and more hard on anyone who is protesting all the recent years. But this is a real, it is a really strong step even for Putin's regime. Because it's especially ironic, given that the state propaganda all these years was based essentially on like this memory of the Second World War and on something like we are peaceful people and we don't want war, etc. And of course, this is the reason why Putin and the authorities decided to ban the word war, because otherwise it would be, I guess, it would sound too crazy for the majority of Russian population. So yes, to call this war a war is now criminalized. And the question about whether the population knows what's going on, it's a difficult question. It's a difficult issue. I mean, of course, the urbanized population, which was critical towards Putin even before the war, they more or less have the means of accessing Western media, accessing some remaining independent Russian media. They know how to use Tor, VPNs, etc., to access blocked websites. So they definitely know what's going on. And about the rest of the population, I'd say that the majority of those who, the majority of the rest of the population, in fact, understands what's going on, because, of course, nobody really believes the authorities that bombings are aimed only at military facilities, etc., because nobody believes Russian authorities in anything. I mean, the trust in the government is really low. But it's just the case that of course, it's difficult to live with the feeling that you are like a citizen of an aggressor country, because that's really like the historical memory of people in Russia that the Soviet Union was under an attack by the Nazi Germany. And there is this whole myth about like a brave country defending itself from the aggressors. And now Russia is this aggressor. And I guess many people just try to close their eyes and like forget about this, and they happily catch on any like piece of propaganda on the TV or in the internet which says something about it's the Ukrainians who are bombing themselves, or we are freeing the Ukraine from the Nazi, and or that the Ukraine was developing biological weapon to destroy all Russians, and this is a real claim by Russian military. So yeah, it becomes more and more crazy, and I think still like people often try to believe that, just because it's difficult to see the reality often, unfortunately. And I think that the role of anarchists and other progressive political movements, in fact, is to try to open these people's eyes. And yeah, and the third question of yours, whether this will be the new Chechnya, the idea of Putin definitely was that it will be like a quick quick win, quick victory, which would of course like improve the political situation inside the country, because many people like when the wars are won by an authoritarian leader, right? But now that there is no quick victory. So 2 weeks have passed and no significant military success up to now. And in these conditions, unfortunately, it seems that it could be the new Chechnya, in the meaning that it will be just like senseless bloodshed for many months or years, which will be horrible, of course. So yes, this is definitely a very grim perspective, a very grim future, and we should do everything in our everything that we can to avoid this. And I guess we probably can talk later about what we are doing for this and what anarchists and other progressive left can do for this.
Cool. Thank you. This is the Final Straw Radio, and you're hearing our conversation with Petr, a Russian anarchist affiliated with Autonomous Action, about the war with Ukraine and anarchist organizing against it. More on the group at avtonom.org, that's Avtonom, or by finding their social media presences linked in our show notes.
The claim about the chemical weapons development is kind of a newer one that I've just seen popping up over the last few days. Can you describe what that claim is that's being made by the Russian military?
Yeah, so they essentially they invent a new reason to invade Ukraine every day, right? So, and at some point, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, they claimed that they found some documents with the names of some chemical substances somewhere in the Ukrainian cities, in the conquered cities, I mean. And based on this, they sort of stated something like that the Ukraine, with the help of the US and NATO, was developing biological weapon to target Russian people, and they even claimed something like that this weapon would be specifically aimed at the Russian DNA, which is of course absolute nonsense, and from the scientific point of view even. But it's just the case that, I mean, we've observed this for many years, that Putin and Kremlin propaganda, just their strategy was always just say as many crazy things as possible, so that the truth is just is drowning in this sea of shit, essentially, right? They don't care about whether what they claim is consistent, because one day they say that we invade Ukraine because we want to defend the people of the east of the Ukraine. The next day they say that we invaded Ukraine because it wanted to become a member of NATO. The next day they say that it's because of nuclear weapon which was being developed there, and it's just like a constant stream of nonsense which nobody actually believes in Russia, except maybe some hardcore patriots, which are definitely the minority of population. So yeah, that's it.
I also wonder, since we're going back into reasons for the invasion that have been given, the denazification, it makes sense, with what you said about the Russian government playing off the massive amount of people that died during World War II fighting the Nazis, but sort of talking about this as the patriotic, an extension of the patriotic war for the fatherland sort of thing. And so the denazification, and we know that there are militias that are connected to or integrated into the Ukrainian military that have white supremacist connections or have indeed Nazis within their ranks. And I've been hearing some other anarchist sources talk about sure, there's Nazis involved in the military of Ukraine. There's Nazis involved in the military of the US. There's Nazis involved in the military of the, alongside of Russian troops. And one group, for instance, that's been mentioned is the Wagner group or Wagner group.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about just to sort of even the playing field, and to point out that states are bad and Nazis like using state militaries. Can you talk a little bit about some of the Nazi groups that are involved around the Russian military?
Yes. So, the whole business of this denazification is, of course, total bullshit. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with reality, meaning that, of course, there are Nazis in the Ukraine, and of course, there are militarized, some militias, armed militias, which are somehow associated with the Ukrainian army. Of course, this is true, but it's definitely not the real sort of aim of invading Ukraine. I mean, Putin doesn't care at all about Nazi or not Nazi. What he cares about is whether he can order these people or not. So yes, definitely there are Nazi mercenaries fighting on the side of Russian army. I mean, they were involved in the armed conflicts on the east of the Ukraine. They were involved in Syria, in many other regions of the world. But actually, it doesn't matter much that they are Nazis. They are much more just like soldiers of Putin than Nazis, because the Nazi movements in Russia, the Nazi groups in Russia, have been mostly eliminated or totally subjected to the state about like 8-10 years ago. So nowadays there are no sort of independent Nazi parties or groups who are active on the streets. They are either dead or in prison, or they are just part of more or less pro-Putin, pro-regime movements. So Nazis are not political players anymore in Russia at all. So it doesn't make sense to talk about them. I don't know, or maybe if you have some like specific questions, I probably can give some answers. But they do not play any significant part in what's happening in Russia now.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I've heard Russian people describe like Nazis are not like fighting you on the streets, but when you get pulled into a police station, there's going to be a Nazi with a boot to beat you, sort of thing. And it seems like one thing about the way that that Putin's regime operates is to destroy autonomous power that could exist, anything that could destabilize and integrate it into their own power base, which is why it's kind of hard for, I think, Western people sometimes to take a read on Putin's politics, because they presume like it's left or it's right or something like that, when actually it's just sort of like neoliberal authoritarian.
Yes, I agree. I mean, Putin doesn't care about whether this particular group is left or right, Nazi or Antifa. He cares about whether they pose a threat to him or not. That's what matters. So yeah, that was the reason behind crushing Nazi movement about 10 years ago. And actually, about the same time, they started crushing Antifa movement. And then I guess it was more or less finished by 2014, when it was split along these conflicts in the Crimea and in the east parts of the Ukraine, because some members of Russian Antifa movement went to fight on the Ukrainian side, and some members of Russian Antifa movement went to fight on the side of these newly established so-called republics. And both sides considered themselves to be anti-fascists. So that was sad to observe, but I guess that's what you expect, more or less, in such political conditions.
Yeah. Putin has made the argument that Ukraine is a part of Russia. We've talked about the claims of genocide on Russian speakers in Donbass. Just like as a note, war times are a time of increased nationalism. Have you seen the idea of who is Russian change shape recently within Russia, or to your experience? And where does this leave people of Chechen or Uzbek or other backgrounds or African backgrounds who may or may not be considered as Russian as others right now? How does race work inside of Russia, basically? And do you get the impression that this has changed around the time of the war drums beating?
Yeah, this, I should admit, is a very complicated issue. So, I mean, it probably would require a separate interview or separate podcast to talk about this in depth. But in general, on the one hand, of course, probably Putin and his elite would probably want to establish some sort of ethnic Russian domination or something similar to that. But on the other hand, they sort of understand that they rule the country, which is really multinational and multiracial and multi-ethnic, and pronouncing one ethnic group as some sort of dominant has its dangers. And on the other hand, of course, another thing which sort of stops them from going full Nazi or fully nationalistic, something like that, is that I already mentioned this mythos of the Great World War and the fighting against German Nazi. And this myth, this sort of archetype, supports Putin because he and the regime as a whole always claim themselves to be the descendants of these sort of brave Soviet warriors who fought Nazis. That's why they avoid directly discriminating, for example, some ethnic groups, or at least stating this explicitly. Although probably personally they probably would like this to happen, but politically they are trying to avoid this. So we have no evidence that the situation of any ethnic minorities in Russia changed a lot since the war started. I mean, there are problems, of course, but it's not that there is any apartheid or something like that. We know that the Ukrainian citizens in Russia are now often subjected to questioning. So they have visits by the police or something, because I guess, well, citizens of the country with which Russia is in war right now, even if Russia itself doesn't admit that this is a war. But yeah, up to now, at least it was just questioning. So essentially, the police comes to the Ukrainian family and asks them something like, "You're not going to commit any terrorist acts? Do you have Do you have relatives in the Ukraine?" Something like that. So it's relatively soft up to now. But we, of course, closely monitoring the situation. We don't know what might happen next. So yeah, but as of now, it's nothing catastrophic happened yet, fortunately.
Do you have any way of sensing, because we've talked about the censorship that's occurring around the information getting to parts of the Russian population, do you have a sense of what the morale might be inside of the military? Can you talk a little bit about the universal military obligation or draft in Russia, and who gets out of it and how they can do that?
Yeah. So yes, there is a draft in Russia. So every male being after turning 18 has to serve for 1 year in the army, except the cases when he starts studying at the university. And it's a long and venerable Russian tradition to avoid draft, and it's been like that in the Russian Empire, in the Soviet Union, and it's still like this in the Russian Federation. So no one, or almost no one, wants to serve in the army. That's almost universal. That's why, yeah, people try to avoid army by all means possible, even before the war, by paying money to the officials, by joining the university, even if they didn't want actually to study, etc., etc., etc. Of course, now when there is a real danger of being sent to a real war, even less people actually want to serve. And since it seems that currently Russia seems to be losing this war, and there are rumors of actually announcing this total mobilization and sending all the conscripts to the war to Ukraine, we expect that there certainly will be protests or at least conflicts in relation to this, and we are trying to observe this and to maybe once we notice that anything is happening, so that we could help the protesters, help those who are trying to organize against this conscription, etc. So yeah. And about the morale inside the military, of course, it's difficult to say because we don't have any spies in the Russian army. I mean, from judging by the news, I guess you more or less read the same news as us. It seems that the morale is not that high, of course. Also because, as I've said, it's some sort of a mind-blowing fact to any Russian soldier that he is now serving the role of an invader, because all his life he was taught that like his role is to defend his country against invaders. Now he is the invader, and also because no one actually wanted to really play part in the war. I mean, all these soldiers, they didn't want to really risk their lives in real battle. So yes, I'd say that the morale is low. There were some rumors about soldiers rioting somewhere near the border against sending them to Ukraine, but there were no independent confirmations about this. So it's still just some rumors. So yeah, I guess we'll see what will happen. Yeah. We definitely expect that there will be some riots, some soldiers rejecting the orders, etc. I am sure we will see more of this.
Слезы, два пальца у рта, как мандат охуевшего единоросса, как допрос, как усмешка мента, как лефортовские коридоры, как беслан, как нордостовский газ, федеральная свора бездушных майоров, Севастополь, Донецк и Луганск, это точно пройдет. Это точно пройдет с пакетом мокрым на голове, с электрометками на руке. Моя Россия сидит в тюрьме, но верь же мне, это пройдет. Какой же черный нам был век, а мне мерещится вдалеке живой надежды забытый свет. Так верь же мне, это точно пройдет. Словно свастика русского мира, как пожары в сибирских лесах. Срок для честных ребят из Пензы и Питера, набитый детьми автозак. Или с ящиком рущая нечисть, 228 и шумом в 5 утра. Как ОМОНовец храбро калечащий женщин, как декабрь, январь и февраль, это точно пройдет. Это точно пройдет с пакетом мокрым на голове, с электрометками на руке. Моя Россия сидит в тюрьме, но верь же мне, это пройдет. Какой же черный нам был век, а мне мерещится вдалеке живой надежды забытый свет. Так верь же мне, это точно пройдет. Все пройдет, все проходит когда-то. Будет год, будет день, будет миг. В одиночестве в морге вчерашний диктатор, а теперь просто мертвый старик. Из петель срежет двери в Лефортово, и Россия воспрянет от сна. Малазийским истерзанным, взорванным бортом в твою ледяную избушку ворвется весна. Это точно пройдет с пакетом мокрым на голове, с электрометками на руке. Моя Россия сидит в тюрьме, но верь же мне, это пройдет. Какой же черный нам был век, а мне мерещится вдалеке живой надежды забытый свет. Так верь же мне, это точно пройдет.
This is the Final Straw Radio, and you're hearing our conversation with Petr, a Russian anarchist affiliated with Autonomous Action, about the war with Ukraine and anarchist organizing against it. More on the group at avtonom.org, that's Avtonom, or by finding their social media presences linked in our show notes.
Yeah, I guess on like Telegram loops and on social media, I've seen video of captured Russian soldiers sort of explaining why they're there, and who, like, that sounds like also a terrible situation to be in, but I can't blame someone for capturing an invading soldier. Or video of older women confronting soldiers and saying you should really put some sunflower seeds in your pocket so that when we kill you, at least something good will grow, things like this. Like, I'm sure the vitriol that they're facing has done quite a deal on, you know, when they're being told that, if anything, that they're going to liberate people or to defend people. It makes me wonder too, like, if they're not doing so well in this facet of the war, I mean, this is speculation, but if the Russian government might decide to focus more on aerial bombardment because it's easier to push a button and kill a bunch of people than it is to go in and face snipers who know the territory.
Yeah, I guess that's more or less what everyone now agrees on, that, yeah, it seems that indeed this is the tactics that the Russian army or the Russian government has chosen now. So if we can't win by conventional weapons, then, yeah, let's just bomb them. Because I guess they used more or less the same tactics in Syria and also in Chechnya, by the way. And it seems to them that it brings them victory, right? So why shouldn't it here in the Ukraine? Of course, the Ukraine is a bit different because it still has its military, more or less, well, not intact, but still in operational state. And also, of course, because unfortunately, I mean, the world didn't pay so much attention to cities being bombed in Syria, but the world does pay a lot of attention to cities being bombed in Ukraine. So from this point of view, I'm not sure that these tactics will be actually profitable for Russian army. But yeah, they're certainly starting to do something like that. Like they're bombing more and more of civilian buildings, residential buildings, etc. Unfortunately, that's definitely the case.
The last few decades since the end of the Cold War and since the end of the Soviet Union have brought, you know, a few shifts and changes in international arms treaties. And I know in the last 6 years, the U.S. has stepped aside from anti-nuclear proliferation treaties that included Russia as a signatory. And now there's a lot of concerns that if NATO or U.S., you know, as a more active element within NATO, decided to escalate participation or actually start participating on the ground, that it could spark a nuclear war. Do you have a sense of people seeing that in Russia as like a possibility? And how do you feel about that?
People in Russia definitely do see this as a possibility, especially considering the fact that Putin himself mentioned it in his speech when he actually announced the start of the war. So he mentioned this, that we are a nuclear power, etc., etc. And also because, of course, many people, especially those who are older ones, they still remember the Soviet times when the expectation of a nuclear war was more or less permanent. So it's not something entirely new. And yeah, I'd say that many people that I know, at least, definitely are afraid of this. And also because there are lots of evidence that Putin is not entirely in his mind, I'd say. Yeah, he definitely has some mental problems, and which means that probably there is not much to prevent him from starting a nuclear war if, I'd say, demons in his head tell him to do so, right? Or angels, I don't know what he has in his head. Yeah. So yes, people are definitely afraid of this. They hope that these are still just hollow threats, but you might never know. And I personally think that we should be afraid of this. That indeed the Russian nuclear power is now in the hand of, first, a person who is definitely a bit mentally unhealthy, and on the other hand, his state apparatus, which is fine-tuned to obey its head and to essentially just tell its head, which is Putin, whatever Putin wants. And in this configuration, there is not much resistance to like possible pressing of this nuclear button. So yeah, I think that the danger is real, unfortunately.
So there's been a lot of talks, again, of NATO states avoiding sending troops so as not to escalate in that sort of way, but sending weapons instead and imposing further sanctions on the Russian economy, including the ending of purchases of oil or the capping or slowing of those purchases, which is a major a major part of the Russian economy is the exporting of petroleum products. How does this affect regular people inside of Russia, and how much do you think that it actually affects the rich and the bureaucrats directly?
It definitely affects regular people. Exchange rates just increased twice or 3 times over like a couple of days, which means that essentially people lost like half of their salaries. And of course, there are already lots of problems with the goods in the shops, with the logistic chains, etc. And I mean, it's really like a large, profound systemic effect on the Russian economy. Even if some people do not yet sort of see it immediately, but it's definitely there. And it definitely will affect regular people a lot, and they will become much poorer than they were before that. How it affects the rich and the capitalist class, that's a good question, and it definitely affects them to some extent. And we see all these boats being captured all around the world, and we see like assets frozen, etc. And of course, the businesses that they own, these businesses also suffer, right? The enterprises, because of all these sanctions. It's difficult to like estimate whom it affects more, the regular people or the rich. I don't even know how it can be measured. All I can say is that yes, it definitely influences people, and some of the sanctions, I guess, make sense in terms of like stopping this Putin's military machine and essentially just slowing down the military part of the economy. But of course, some other sanctions, for example, these Visa and MasterCard payment systems blocking transactions of Russians abroad, essentially prohibiting them to use payment cards issued by Russian banks abroad. This sort of makes sense maybe from the pure like ethical point of view, but from the point of view of at least allowing people to fly from the country and then use their money abroad, this is not that good. I mean, I know many people who flew from the country because they were some sort of anti-Putin activists, but then their payment cards were blocked and they essentially were left abroad without any money at all. And it doesn't make much sense, I guess. So yeah, I mean, there are very contradictory opinions about sanctions, and I don't have any clear like answer whether they are beneficial or not. But definitely people will suffer, and they're suffering already. That's definitely true.
Do you think that anti-state, anti-capitalists, libertarian leftists, and anarchists are poised to make good use of the momentum against the war and the increased pressure within Russia to sort of bring about some sort of change, even if it starts from a small place, including the anti-militarist, anti-draft sentiments?
Well, the short answer is that I would like to believe it. The long answer is that, as I've said, there were literally 2 decades of destroying the protest landscape, including anarchists. And there are very few anarchist or libertarian left organizations who are still like capable of actually organizing something massive, right? Or mobilizing significant numbers of people, for example. Having said that, I still think that the current the situation that we have now is somewhat promising as well. So it's bad, but there is some silver lining in this cloud, right? Because lots of people, including those from the anarchist movement, actually think that based on what we see now, the Russian Federation, as we know it, probably will not survive like in the next several months or several years, maybe. Because indeed, like the economic situation is quite tough now, and it's really catastrophic. Also because of the sanctions and because of the war, of course, because war is an expensive business as well, and also because of purely political things. Because, as I've said, Putin probably planned to finish this war very quickly in a couple of days, but he failed in this. And within the circles of his sort of friends and henchmen and military generals, top hats, etc., they do not like it very much when someone fails, right? It's not something tolerated. So we expect definitely that the power struggles there at the top of the Kremlin chair, they will intensify. And it's very probable that the regime will somehow collapse in this or that way quite soon. Well, comparatively soon, of course, we cannot pronounce any particular dates, but there is this feeling. And of course, in this situation, we probably have good chances to sort of establish, or at least help to establish, something more decentralized and more libertarian on the ruins of this collapsed regime. Of course, it's still a good question on to what extent we'll be able to do anything meaningful. But at least like nowadays, we're trying to at least spread the word, spread the sort of libertarian ideas and anarchist ideas, and trying to push gently these anti-war vibes, anti-war protests into more sort of anti-authoritarian channel, right? So as to explain to people that in order to stop the war, it's not enough to simply get the troops back. You also have to throw Putin away from the Kremlin, and you also need to make sure that no second Putin arrives there. So yes, I'd say that we can make good use of this moment, and we have to try.
So how have Russians and anarchists in particular reacted to the recent military interventions in Kazakhstan and the backing of the Belarus dictatorship?
Yeah, well, here the answer is simple. We definitely stood in solidarity with the Belarus protests. So like lots of our Belarus comrades, anarchists from Belarus, participated in these protests. Lots of them were jailed for this, some of them for really long sentence terms. So yes, of course, we supported them, and lots of Russian anarchists actually went to Belarus to participate in these protests. The events in Kazakhstan are more complicated, meaning that there is still some sort of a fog of war there. It's still not entirely clear what happened in Kazakhstan, right? Was it a military coup d'etat, or was it like a folk revolution? Was it something else? I guess we're still trying to find it out. But we definitely supported the protests in the western part of the country against these gas prices increasing. And we definitely tried to resist, like to protest against sending Russian troops to Kazakhstan. Because, yeah, of course, this is all sort of parts of the same chain, like sending troops to Ukraine, sending troops to Kazakhstan. This is all sort of part of this empire politics by Putin and by the Russian state. So it looks at Kazakhstan, at Ukraine, at Belarus as its sphere of influence, which they should rule. And of course, we as anarchists naturally oppose this way of thinking in general, right? So we do not think that any empire has the right to tell the people what to do, right? So yes, we definitely oppose this.
This is the Final Straw Radio, and you're hearing our conversation with Petr, a Russian anarchist affiliated with Autonomous Action, about the war with Ukraine and anarchist organizing against it. More on the group at avtonom.org, that's Avtonom, or by finding their social media presences linked in our show notes.
Do you get much of a sense of wider Russian sentiments from the wider population about those two interventions, or kind of hard to gauge?
You mean about Kazakhstan and Ukraine, or?
Kazakhstan and Belarus, yeah.
Yeah, so in Belarus there was no military intervention. I mean, Russian troops did not enter Belarus, or at least officially didn't enter. Russia helped Belarusian dictatorship only with money, lots of money. And they also sent some TV propagandists, like some media managers or whatever, to help Belarusian propaganda. So there were no, like, at least no clear military intervention. Although, of course, Russian troops now, they are now in Belarus, and they actually attack in Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. But that's just because they signed lots of agreements, and I mean, Putin and Lukashenko are best friends now. So that's sort of happening all the time. But there was no intervention. But yes, the general opinion of Russian public, I guess, about Kazakhstan, people just didn't have enough time to actually, again, understand what's happening. It all happened like in the course of 10 days or even less. And I don't think that there is any like sentiment which is shared by a large part of Russian population about this. Most Russians just don't care a lot about Kazakhstan in general. So it's difficult for me to give any like clear estimate about this. About Belarus, it was polarized. So the Russian society was polarized about the riots and protests in Belarus. So those who were like more conservative, they have this sort of nostalgic feeling about Belarus, reminding them about Soviet times. So, and they, of course, sort of believed that these are protests inspired by the West, which is poised to destroy this island of Soviet Union. So, yes, they definitely were against the protests, and they supported Lukashenko. And another part of the society, more sort of liberal, I guess, was unilaterally against Lukashenko, and they supported the protests with whatever means possible. So yeah, it's polarized very much.
Do you have any words for comrades internationally or who are in Ukraine who might hear this? And how can anarchists abroad support the efforts of dissidents within Russia and everyone living under the Putin regime who are resisting?
Well, we are in contact with our comrades in Ukraine, so it's not like we are disconnected. I mean, there is a constant flow of information from here to there and from there to here. But yeah, anyway, I mean, of course, the main words that we can send them again is that they are fighting not just for themselves or for Ukraine. They are fighting for Russia as well, because we really believe that as it happened a lot in the historical times, a lost war often meant the fall of the regime in Russia. And we definitely believe that this will be another case of that. So yes, stay strong and defeat Putin. And we in Russia or internationally will help you to do this as much as possible. And about the question, how can anarchists abroad support the efforts of dissidents in Russia? Well, I guess the best way to do this is to, again, spread the information. Spread the word that it's not the case that Russian population, that the entire Russian population support this war. There are thousands of people on the streets, or dozens of thousands of people on the streets, thousands of those who are arrested. And yes, there are political organizations, even if political organizations or groups, even if not that large, but still dozens of people who are actively working against war and organizing protests, meaning designing leaflets, printing leaflets, starting websites or groups in social networks, etc. And all of this is extremely important. And if you want to support people with something else, not just with the word, we have several cryptocurrency wallets, and I can, I guess, send you privately the numbers. And if someone wants to give money to, again, printing leaflets, paying for websites, paying for the fees which our comrades have after being arrested at the street protests, yes, please do. We would be grateful for that.
Yeah. Is there anything that I failed to ask about that you want to talk about?
Well, I guess we covered all the important topics. And the only thing is probably that in the current situation, it's, of course, quite important not to fall victim to propaganda from both sides. I mean, both from the Russian side and from the Ukrainian and broadly the general Western side. And unfortunately, we sometimes see this in the Western media, some sort of this anti-Russian vibe, right? Which is probably understandable in times of war, but at the same time, it's quite dangerous, we think. So yeah, as I've said, it's really important to always separate like the actions of the Russian government, which Russian people didn't choose to begin with, and the actions or the opinions of those who actually live in Russia and who suffers from the actions of Russian government. So the Kremlin does not occupy just Ukraine; it actually occupies Russia as well. So yes, I think that is an important thing to remind people about.
Yeah, absolutely. Petr, how can people follow your work and the work of Autonomous Action?
Yeah, so we have a website, autonom.org, and it has an English section. We do not have like enough resources to translate all the materials into English, but we try to translate at least the most important ones. And you can also find the links to our social networks there. So we have like all sorts of channels that you can expect: Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, even Instagram. So yes, you can follow us in whatever channel you prefer. We have a Telegram channel as well, which is quite active.
VK? Do you have a
VK, you mean this Russian social network Vkontakte? Yes, we have a page there, but we do not recommend to use it. It's owned by the Russian state. Just don't use VK.
If listeners do speak Russian, or besides the written content on the website and on the social media, you've also got a podcast on SoundCloud, right?
Yes.
But it's in Russian, so.
Yes, we have a podcast. Yes, it's in Russian. It's weekly. So yeah, people definitely can subscribe to it on YouTube, SoundCloud, or whatever, or just listen it from our website. And yes, we are trying to sort of give a weekly anarchist analysis of what is happening. Yeah, and we see that many people actually subscribe, and it seems that the format is convenient for the audience. So yeah, we're quite proud of it, actually.
Yeah, and I see that at least some of the notes from those are getting translated. I imagine if someone does have those language skills also and wants to contribute, offering to do translations of some of the stuff published on the site might be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Crime Think actually did some translation on their own initiative. But yeah, if we definitely need translators. So if someone feels that they have these skills, then they're definitely welcome to contact us via any means possible.
Cool. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you again for taking the time and for all the work that you're doing.
Thanks for having me, and hope that the war will be stopped.
Yeah, and then the states.
And now a brief announcement. On Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, 9 comrades were arrested by the DGSI, the French anti-terrorism police unit, across France. Some were in Toulouse, or in Dordogne, in the Paris region, in Brittany, or in Rennes. Anarchists are being accused of being in, quote, a criminal association planning a terrorist attack, unquote. All but one comrade has been released. Some were in prison for months of pre-trial detention. They're awaiting trial and are placed under judicial control. The defendants, not all of whom know each other, have been under surveillance for a long period of time, including digital surveillance such as planting recording devices in vehicles as well as physical surveillance. On March 4th, 2022, it was announced that one comrade who is still in prison was 6 days into a hunger strike. He did so at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, knowing very well that this information would drown in the news about the war. That all efforts would be focused on supporting resistance in Ukraine and the people fleeing from there. It's amazing what support for Ukraine has gathered, even though it also came with shortcomings and contradiction, racist sentiment, and nationalist visions for the future, to name but two of them. Our comrade would in the same way support people's fight for freedom. He's in isolation, the method the state uses to deprive us of connection and communication with others. He needs us in the same way that we need each other. We can never win alone. A person with their body can resist the repression of the state, but without access, we have on the outside, his voice will not be heard. There are suggestions of how to support this comrade available at solidarity to December 8, the number 8.wordpress.com. You can find under the page /category/English more information about the case in that language. It's also notable that this comrade has been repressed for having participated in the struggle in Rojava against Daesh and against Syrian and Turkish attacks on people there. So these are likely reasons that this person is getting repressed so heavily and being targeted, and they could definitely use some support. One more quick announcement. There's been a statement on continued and widening repression by the city of Asheville of community members for alleged participation in housing rights and anti-houseless encampment sweeps, as the city declared code purple for danger of freezing for homeless folks around New Year's of 2021. If you want to donate to ongoing mutual aid efforts, on Venmo you can find at AVL Survival for the Asheville Survival Program, who we've had on the show before. If you want to donate to the Defendant's Legal Fund, on Venmo you can find at AVL Defendant Fund. And finally, if you want to contribute to future movement anti-repression work in the Asheville area, on Venmo you can find at Blue Ridge ABC for Blue Ridge Anarchist Black Cross and their anti-repression and bail fund. Quote, "The following is an update from the now 15 defendants facing charges in Asheville, North Carolina, as a part of the city government's attempt to repress food sharing and mutual aid organizing. Since our last statement at the beginning of February, the state has targeted 8 more community members in connection with the December demonstrations in Aston Park criticizing the city government's inhumane treatment of homeless folks. We are now a group of 15 locals facing multiple felony charges for participating in mutual aid efforts in our community. The city government claims that we are each responsible for leaving behind more than 500 pounds of trash following a peaceful protest. The Asheville Police Department, or APD, claims this resulted in 100 hours of, quote, cleanup efforts, unquote, the use of heavy machinery, and the cost of $2,680. Over the past 3 months, the taxpayer dollars and time expended surveilling, harassing, arresting, and now prosecuting the defendants vastly exceeds the damages charged by the APD. How many of the same resources and heavy machinery have been employed by the city and county government to remove and destroy homeless camps in the last year alone? These actions are not an effort to make the city safer. They are an attack on mutual aid. We remain committed to ensuring all members of our community have a safe place to live, a community around them, and agency over their own lives. We still need your help as we face state repression and attempts to shut down our networks of care. Keep sharing food and care and solidarity with one another. Keep delivering groceries, cooking meals, sharing funds, and showing up in the parks. Keep standing with your community. Keep building this beautiful, transformative mutual aid movement. Keep sharing our story. In solidarity and community, the Sanctuary Camp Defendants. You can find that text and those links, as well as a past statement by these folks, at brabc.blackblogs.org. It's currently the main post. If not, look for the article entitled New Statement from Asheville Sanctuary Camp Defendants. If you would like to support The Final Straw, you can subscribe to our podcast via various platforms, follow and share our materials online, as well as give us feedback via the links at tiahasar.wtf/tree, as in Linktree.
To support our transcription work and wider project, you can subscribe to us via patreon.com/TFSR. You can also buy some merch or find donation methods at tfsr.wtf/support.
We'd be better off if we brought down Gorbachev. I am the man who arranges the blocks that continue to fall from up above. The markets are free, so much money for me. Tell me, why should I care for peace and love? The markets are free, so much money for me. Tell me, why should I care for peace and love? Peace and love. Peace and love. And now the wall is down, the Marxists frown, there's foreign shops all over town. When in Red Square, well, don't despair, there's Levi's and McDonald's there. The US gave us crystal meth, and Yeltsin drank himself to death. But now that Putin's put the boot in, who'll get in our way? So we reject free enterprise, and once again the left will rise. Prepare the flags to be unfurled, 'cause we're seceding from the world. We shall regain the Georgian soil, we shall obtain the Arctic oil, we shall arrange the blocks and toil forever and a day.
In a continuation of the tradition begun by Sean Swain in 2019, naming those killed by police in the so-called US, a guest will be reading Sean's segment today. The information was compiled by the website fatalencounters.org. Beginning January 1st, 2021.
In the continuation of the tradition began by Sean Swain in 2019, naming those killed by police in the so-called US, I'll be reading Sean's segment. This information was compiled by the website fatalencounters.org. Here are the names of some of those killed by police in the month of February. February 1st, Richard Fenton Thomas, Kevin Hayes, Terry L. Carson, Andrew Scott Kisleck. Name withheld by police. February 2nd, Joshua Kreitz, Amanda Serrano Garcia, Gavon Lamont Miles, Jordan Nicole Southers, Tavius Montacarol, David Lee Huber. Name withheld by police. Wayne Keith Wheezy Smith, Jr. February 3rd, Rolando Pinto Mendez. Name withheld by police. Marvin Payton, Jr. Tracy Hope Walter Hensley. Ronald Sylvester Washington. Anthony Andrew Renuart. Nicholas Pingel. February 4th, Tilford T.I. Barton. Kawan Bubba Hurd. Trey Webster. Dante Green. Genoa Donald, a.k.a. Donald D. Jonah. Omar Felix Cueva. Justin D. Quick. Ariella Sage Eloise Crawford, a.k.a. Deidre Eloise Hawkins. February 5th, Dino Raul Morales. Christopher Hoggins. Name withheld by police. Andrew Hogan. Blanca E. Cadavid. Josu Drummond Cruz. February 6th, Rashad M. Muse. Anthony Greco. Dennis Denham. Name withheld by police. Scott Tiati. Anthony Loya. Philip Francis. Kevin Kostlow. February 7th, Keenan Saylor. Brooke Leanne Blair. Nathan Rashad James. Dustin Demorion Powell. Brian Gregory Scott, Darius Shackelford. February 8th, Johnny Gregory, Clifford Woodards II, Shay Estelle Jones, Joseph Joe Johnson, Clay Tatum, Jonathan O'Quinn. February 9th, DeMarco Montez Henderson, Gregory Taylor, Trey Bartholomew. February 10th, Cortez Lee Bogan, name withheld by police. Jordan Montreal Walton, Larry Wayne Franklin, Patricia Ann Franklin, Marquette Martin, Jessica Ruth Munyon. February 11th, Eric J. Porter, Manuel Fernandez, Jacob Aaron Thomas, Edwin Aiden Velasquez, Alexis Leah Davis Gooden, Clifford E. Wilbur Jr., Brian D. Ellis, name withheld by police. Jonathan Turner, Gregory Chandler Metz, Isabella Bella Calhoun Chipres, Mateo Salvador, Sofio Sotelo Torres, name withheld by police. February 13th, Devarion Kennard, Daer Jonte Gray, Aaron Nagash, Jephthah Lai Pan Leon, name withheld by police, and another name withheld by police. Jeremiah Calderon, Rihanna Vargas, Terrence Valdivia. February 14th, Bruce Deal, Adam Bruce Connors, name withheld by police. Brian Scott Hicks, Philip N. Davenport, February 15th, name withheld by police. Troy Alton Allen, Francisco Eduardo Flores, February 16th, name withheld by police. Royce Robertson, Ivan Sandoval, Maninder Singh, Juan Carlos Pena Noda, Derek J. Hayden, February 17th, James Edward Coe, Dustin A. Crane, Michael J. Magley, name withheld by police. Another name withheld by police. February 18th, Juan Carter Hernandez, Timothy Daniel Statham, Sergio Sanchez, William Clayton Blackwell, China Cardena. February 19th, Ryan Daniel Shirev, Chad Curtis Loynachan, name withheld by police. Timothy David Franson, name withheld by police. February 20th, William Robert Ice, Randall Lee Lockaby, Claude Trevino, Christian W. Alexander, Haley R. Stainbrook, Arnell States. February 21st, Daniel Newton Neal, Dominic Lucas Coach, Andrew Allen Corser, Kian Smalls. February 22nd, Carlton James C.J. Adams, Lacasselle Thomas, name withheld by police. February 23rd, name withheld by police again in Seattle. Dale Arthur Amstutz Dunn, name withheld by police. Julia G. Georgiadis. February 24th, Michael Richard Stambaugh, Michael Smith, name withheld by police. Alante Damar Murphy, Tara Cheatham, Arturo Gomez Kalel. February 25th, Adam John Lunt, Cambea Dade, Lanice Dade, Ronald Alvin Colvin, Benjamin D. Tyson, Shadow Ridge Stanley, Zachary Douglas Lumpkin, Donald Francis Hairston, Frederick Earl Height II. This is the 26th. Maggie Ann Dickerson, Isaiah Strong, Lindsay Murphy, Thomas William Mack, Dakota G. Richards, David Pogo Joseph Wayne Conwell, February 27th, Fred Bo Bowman Trundle, David J. Savella, Shannon Michael Savella, Leroy Sneed, Jerry Lynn Roseberry, this is the 28th, Todd Danoff, Rudy M. Duvivier, Roger Dale Gibson, Jason Raymond Sugg, Martin Chavez, Farah Rauch, Joseph Dugan.
You can still write Sean at his new old new again address at Sean Swain, number A243205, OSP Youngstown, 878 Coitesville Hubbard Road, Youngstown, Ohio 44505. You can find his past writings, updates on his case, hear his past audio, find out how to get his books, plus ways to contribute to his legal defense fund at SeanSwain.org. Psst. You can Cash App $Swaniac 1969 or send dough to us and comment that it's for Swain's defense. More info is also available on Instagram at Swaniac 1969 or Twitter at SwainRocks.
This is The Final Straw. This show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw Radio, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned co-op in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a catalog of Firestorm's books and zines, plus a full calendar of events up at their website, firestorm.coop.